Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sporting Max. Today we're joined by one of the biggest names in sports media, if not the biggest name in sports media. You know, you hear him on the radio, you see him on your TVs. He owns SEN, part owner of Melbourne United, and most recently, like the voice of Melbourne just mentioned, the Perth Wildcats. Craig Hutchison, welcome to the podcast, Craig. It's amazing to have you on, an absolute honour and privilege to have you on. How you going at the moment?
Max, what a privilege to be on your 50th episode, mate. Congratulations of making it to 50. You've done a great job. I really admire the way you've gone about it, and very humbled to be invited onto your 50th episode.
Thanks, Craig. Now, you're sort of very well-known and your journey's sort of well-known and documented. I want to get into the hard work that got you to actually where you are today, you know, your early days in journalism and things like that. So where did it sort of all start for you, and what was your childhood like for you?
Well, Max, I always wanted to be a journalist when I was young, and so I started a little bit younger than most, but not clearly as young as you. How old are you, Max? 14?
14, yeah.
Yeah, I began as a 12-year-old at the Warragul Gazette, which is where my hometown was in Gippsland. My dad wrote a column for the local paper, and he was kind enough to let me write that under his name for a year, so I got some experience. and then he handed it over to me at the end of the year, and was able to tell the paper that I'd already been doing it for a year. So what age did you start at, Max?
I started about a year ago, so 13. It's not quite as early as you, but hopefully striving sort of same goals.
Well, mind you, I couldn't do what you're doing. I couldn't record and publish and share content, and it was obviously a different time and a different era too, but I really admire what you're doing. And so I always think, and I always say to young people, Max, and you're clearly the walking example of this, is if you get all the experience you can while you're at school, then when you get to 18, you've already had a career in whatever you're interested in your case, media, and then it makes it a little bit easier to choose your career path because you've already worked in the space.
So what was that like to have that sort of, I guess, experience to work as sort of a 12-year-old, you know, writing columns and articles for a newspaper?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great fun. I made a lot of mistakes. I learned from those mistakes, but really enjoyed back then being a writer of columns, and I took on most things. I took on anything I could get my hands on. I was writing football and trots and dogs and anything going on in town that I could really get involved in, and that helped me get some experience through school to the point where I got to the end of year 12, and had 5 years of writing content.
So sort of in your early days of journalism, what was your first sort of foot in the door?
My first foot in the door probably was getting a cadetship at the Herald Sun newspaper. So I went for one when I was 18 and I missed out.
Wow.
And I was disappointed, and it had been my dream to work for the Herald Sun at the time. And then I went again 12 months later, Max, and was fortunate enough to get shortlisted and then to ultimately get a job. So that then the real work began. So
what was involved in that real work, sort of staying up late, working so hard to get to where you want to go?
Yeah, well, in those days, Max, the cadetships were really tough at the Herald Sun. So you had a 3-year cadetship, and you had to do all of the things no one else wanted to do. It was like being, a copy boy almost. You had to, or girl, you had to really take on all the meaningful and mundane chores. And so what I chose to do was work extra hours over and above those chores. So if there was an 8-hour day, I'd work 2 or 3 hours beforehand and 2 or 3 hours afterwards to try and get the most.
Now you're renowned you're renowned for your work ethic. In your first sort of years at the Herald Sun, you mentioned that sort of cadetship before. Can you take me through that experience and how that your sort of work ethic there set you up?
Well, I started writing sports stories, and even though I wasn't in sport, and in the end I got enough of them published where they felt obliged or wanted to give me a go in sport. And so I got some sports experience as a cadet, which is pretty rare. In those days, they didn't let the cadets in sport. And ultimately it was my opportunity to leave there and go and do sport radio, because I'd done a little bit of it while I was a sport journalist. So I guess I always say to young people, and I'm not an expert by any means, but try and do the job you want over and above while you're doing the job you've got. So dedicate some time in your own time every day to doing the over and above to get yourself somewhere.
So what have been the key, well, for those who don't know, you usually spend sort of every AFL off season in America, you know, developing yourself and learning. Can you talk us through why you started at first doing this?
Yeah, I just fell in love with America, Max, at the age of about 30. So it took me a while to find it. I loved New York City. I loved LA, and I found it quite inspiring too. So you'd see things, or you'd hear something, or you'd read something, and at that time I felt that the American media market thinked bigger and acted bolder, and it was kind of, for me, a weird way, it was quite inspiring to. And then you'd see an idea, you think that won't work in Australia, but maybe a version of it will, and maybe that might, and then I found, then plus the other thing is it makes you hungry to want to keep going, and to keep going, you need a bit of forward to go. So it actually makes you work harder.
So what was sort of the key learning experiences, or what you learned most out of your experience as a whole, from being in America?
I think just think a bit bigger, be a bit bolder. Like if you set your aims high and you only get to half of where you want to go, it's still a good rise. So it forced me to get my eyes up, I would say, and think a bit more boldly. It also, at the time, was a little bit ahead of Australia in some of the trends, in media trends, and particularly in the digital space. And so I found that inspiring. And the other thing was just spending, you meet a lot of people who are, particularly in New York and LA, especially New York, who are like you, who are generally just trying to do things and are entrepreneurial and, you know, trying things that do work and don't work. And that is a little bit infectious as well. So that were the things I probably took from it.
Now I heard on your Sounding Board podcast with Damien Barrett that you were in America and sort of playing pickup basketball at the local Reebok gym, and just so happened to run into Hollywood star Adam Sandler. Can you tell us about this experience?
Yeah, I think I was about 30, Max. I was just resigned all my jobs in Australia, and I was in America working on the next move and doing some radio back home, but kind of in a state of transition. And used to go to shoot basketball in the mornings on my own in the Reebok gym and just think about things. And in that time, Adam Sandler was down the other end of the court. He was with his trainer and another friend, and they yelled out one day, "Hey, you want to make a 4 and play 2-on-2?" And I didn't know who they were. I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And then the next thing you know, I'm in a 2-on-2 game with Adam Sandler, and he was supposed to be on that particular day. At the end of the session, they said, "Are you back here tomorrow?" And I said, "Yep." And they said, "Okay, we'll play again." So I played again, and then the third day we played again, and then we played in the pickup games in the afternoon together. So it was a weird sort of 48 hours, but he was incredibly good mannered and really great guy, and loves his basketball clearly. So it was a bit of it's one of those things you can tell, a story you can tell when you get a bit old like me, Max.
Yeah. How do you rate yourself as a basketballer?
Poorly. In fact, my 11-year-old stepson, who's not far from here, took me apart on the court yesterday. So I think I lost the game 20-6.
Oh, ouch.
So I'm not much good, Max, but it's a great little outlet every day.
Throughout your career, you've worked for sort of nearly every major Australian media company, you know, Channel 9, Channel 7, 3AW and Triple M. There were obviously sort of lots of ups and downs throughout this career. Can you expand on how you bounced back up any time there was some adversity or difficulty?
Yeah, thanks, Max. It's a great question. Look, I think we're in the media is very emotional and it's very opinionated. So the world's got emotional and opinionated anyway when the products that you're talking about aren't in those spaces. But in media in particular, it's one person's opinion over another. And that goes to employees and talent. And so it's a difficult business. You can be a brilliant broadcaster in the eyes of 99% of the people, but there could be 1% who work in management who don't like you and they can go against you. And then it could go the other way. You can be, not as good, but then someone in management really likes you and you get further than you might have otherwise got. So there's a little bit of luck involved. For me, I've been sacked, I've been suspended, I've been sued. A lot of things have gone wrong. But I never took it too personally because I understand that it's an opinion and you can only work on yourself and try and get better. And if you're continually trying to be the best version of yourself you can be, then hopefully more things go right than wrong over time. But some people take things really to heart when they go wrong, and I always had the attitude that I'm just going to try my best every day, and if that doesn't work, I'll try and do something else.
What's that like, having that sort of positive mindset, attitude, and how do you think that got you through some of those tough times?
Well, I think you got to react when things go wrong quickly and get on with it. And I've had a couple of those. 3AW, I lost my position and moved on pretty quickly. The footy show, I dealt with it really quickly, because I just thought you can't you can't sit around and worry about what was, because you can't change it. You can only worry about things you can control.
Yeah.
And equally, it's media. There's always another opportunity coming. There's always something else to think about, to do. So I feel quite lucky.
Now, just on that footy show, like sort of Thursday night footy show, I remember getting home sort of every Thursday night after basketball training, sitting back, relaxing, watching you on the Thursday night footy show. The highlight of my week, by the way. What was it like on set, and the preparation that goes into putting together a show like that?
Well, I had 2 runs on the footy show, Max. So the first run as a reporter was quite stressful, because you're under pressure to come up with a big story every week, and it's a little more noticeable on an entertainment show. Like if you do a story on the news, there's 20 other stories on the news. You're just one of 20.
Yeah.
And whether your story is a good one or a bad one is not as noticeable. Whereas when you're on an entertainment show and you're the only story, you stand out, whether it's a good story or a bad, pretty quickly, and you're under a bit more pressure. So I found that quite stressful, very anxious, always worried about next week's story, and that was difficult. Hosting was less stressful than being a reporter on the show, because it was still stressful a little bit, but it was not the same degree of anxiety. And and so it was a great experience. It's an institution, and was an institution. Went for 30 years, got a rich history. Feel very fortunate to play a very small role towards the end of its run, and disappointed that it finished. Met some great friends, Gary Lyon, James Brayshaw, Sam Newman, and others, and work with some very talented people. So it was very good, Max.
Now, just like sort of on being a part of footy shows, you've been on Footy Classified since 2007 now. Caroline Wilson, Wayne Carey, Eddie McGuire, and others. What's this experience been like for you?
Been wonderful, yeah, and that's probably a little closer to my heart, because I was there from the first day. We were Gary Lyon and I were part of, and Caroline, of sculpting what it would become. And it's been an incredible run. So it's very rare to get that length of time on TV on a show, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think it continues to shape the AFL agenda every week. So it's done a remarkable job, given it's never had any AFL rights in that time to leverage, of being a cut-through program. And I think a lot of the credit for that, to be really candid, belongs with Caroline Wilson. And in more recent times, the great work of Matthew Lloyd and others. But Caro's been the one constant. Her opinions are strong. You don't always agree with them. In fact, I often disagree with them. But the program's built on healthy debate and respect, and I think Caroline has been the overwhelming strength of the program.
What was that like, coming in on the first day with Gary Lyon, sort of thing?
In terms of co-hosting together?
Yeah,
it was a great honour, because he was already an existing host at Nine, and I was new kid on the block back in 2007, and because we had a good relationship, we were able to work it out between ourselves who did what and when, and so it was great fun.
So how did you sort of create and found CrocMedia with James Swanwick?
Well, we were in LA, Max, and we were kicking around in his backyard, throwing a basketball around, both frustrated with our lot in life. He was a frustrated entertainment reporter. I was a frustrated footy reporter. We had a lot in common, that we both wanted to be doing something other than we were doing. We're the same age and the same sort of part of our life, and so we suggested we do something. And so we started a business together, and it wasn't very well thought through at the time. We began quickly and got on with it, but it's been really good.
What was CrocMedia all about at the start?
At the start, Max, was about PR, and our second product was television distribution, and neither of those things were ultimately very successful, but they did get us towards our third product, which was radio syndication, and that was a little bit more successful.
So can you take me through that merger that occurred sort of between Pacific Star / SEN and CrocMedia to initially form or make up Sports Entertainment Network?
Yeah, we were a supplier to SEN and to other stations. We were looking to get to the next level of our business. The SEN business at the time, or the Pacific Star Network, we had a great relationship for most of that run. It had a shareholder that was looking to get more involved, and he came and saw us. And in the end, we worked out that there was a fit there to put the two businesses together. And so we went through a pretty long and at times complicated merger, Max, but it worked out well.
So now you've got an incredible and close relationship with one of the best journalists in Australia, Gerard Whateley. Can you elaborate on your relationship with him and what it's like to get him across to SEM?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a transformational day for us, Max, because Gerard represented everything that we wanted the network to be. He was a great journalist, good storyteller, great interviewer, considered. It wasn't a shock jock. He was very measured, and just sets a tone, and highly respected among industry, and just sets a tone of the conversation every day. So we're able to work together and make that happen, and it's been a great move, Max. We've been delighted.
On SEN, you sort of co-hosted Off the Bench since 2009. Now I've read that you make sort of 9 versions of Off the Bench into around 70 radio stations around the country. How's that show assisted you in building your business?
It's been the show that's really driven our business, Max, because it was the first show where we learned to syndicate around the country. It began regionally before it went on SEN, and I love Saturday morning radio. It's fun. It's a time of the week where people don't want to think too hard. It's lighthearted, and it's been a great lesson in learning how to look after clients and to add value to them over a period of time. And so I feel quite fortunate, and it's nowadays and it's my mate Liam, so we've been friends for a long time. I've emceed him at one of his weddings, one of his many weddings, and it's been a lot of fun, Max, to continue to do that. And these days we're so busy we don't get to see each other too often, so it's like two mates catching up on a Saturday morning.
What's the difference, do you think, between sort of being on radio and then being on TV? Obviously, on TV you have to like dress up and be in formal attire and everything like that. But then when you're on radio, you can sort of kick back and relax a bit more.
Yeah.
Which one would you sort of rather prefer?
Radio. Yeah, radio is a greater passion. It's less structured and it gives you a chance to express yourself more. Television's more structured, and I think it's more relatable radio. It's the realest form of people.
Now SEN now has, I think it's around 28 radio stations with the launch of SENZ not that long ago now. When you sit back and look at what you've built over the years, what are you thinking?
There's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do and a lot of things still to drive, and that's part of the challenge. So I don't really look back on it too much, Max. There'll be a day when we can reflect on a great bunch of people doing a great bunch of things. But at the moment, it's all about trying to move to the future and build forward, and that's the challenge.
We've recently had Mark Howie on the podcast, and he asked us to ask you a question. Can you take us through your goal in the EJ Whitten Legends match?
Max, now it's very nice of Howie to suggest to you to ask that, but he's only being cheeky. And plus, if you just Google greatest goals in AFL history, you'll find it straight away on your YouTube. I'm joking. I think it's a 10-year anniversary this week, ironically. So you're having your 50th podcast anniversary, and I reckon it's about 10 years ago. I remember being scared on the night. There was a lot of big bodies around me that I'd done bad stories about over the journey. A lot of tough guys at football, and so I remember trying to think, how do I get through this? And I was fortunate enough that it worked out okay.
It was great to see you sitting courtside in NBL Game 3. I was up in the bleachers. What attracted you to becoming a shareholder or owner of Melbourne United?
Max, we just thought as a business that the sport was on the move. It was a good time to get involved. We had customers of ours who wanted to get involved. And so we worked really hard to get a seat at the table and become a shareholder. And then obviously when you're involved, you become more passionate. What did you think of the Melbourne United win? May I ask?
Oh, it's fantastic. Udo Bubba finishing and sealing the game off at the end with a dunk just caps off a terrific season.
Yeah, it was a great win, wasn't it? And I was wrapped for all the players, and they did a great job, and wrapped for the coach, Dean Vickerman. So it worked out pretty well.
I see you recently purchased the Perth Wildcats. What's the strategy behind that investment?
Yeah, Max, it's a good question. It's a great sporting asset. First of all, we're in the sport business. It has a dominant hold on the Perth marketplace. It is very emotionally connected to the community. It's done a great job in the community. It's a good business deal, but it's also a really great opportunity for us to build our business in Perth and build off of the success of that team in terms of our media business. So yeah, it's worked out well. We're subject to final league approval, so we're working through that at the moment, but really, really confident and excited that it'll go ahead, and wrapped that we can have a meaningful asset in Perth that we can work with on for sports fans there.
Now you've got sort of own or part own the top two, I guess you could say the top two teams in the NBL. They sort of separate themselves by a fair distance from all the other teams. What's that like to sort of have those two teams under your wing?
Well, I mean, it's great, but our Melbourne United relationship will change because we will work with the team to divest down to a more passive shareholding and be a little bit more hands off in the decision making. That's for sure, and be more respectful of the team. But yeah, Perth is probably the most successful club in the competition.
Yeah.
And Melbourne is at the moment the most successful team. So they're two great teams to be affiliated with.
Have you got any advice for any aspiring sports media talent to get to the next level and get into sports radio and broadcasting?
I reckon follow what you're doing, Max. You've been so persistent in getting today's interview together, which I really admire. So that's reward for effort for you. And to do what you're doing, to start to publish, to start to do your own thing, to start to act in the job that you've got. As you can see these days, it's what we're doing right now. You can actually broadcast without a platform.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is key, is be persistent and start early and build your career before you finish school so you can hang your hat on experience.
So what's it like to have at SEN stars of like sports industry, Cam Smith, Brendan McCullum, Adam Gilchrist, guys like that coming day in, day out, Kane Corns, like I mentioned, Gerald Waitley, Dwayne Russell, coming in, day out to work for SEN?
Well, it's great because they're all very passionate people, very passionate women and men. They're very driven. They're highly competitive, and you learn more from them than they do from you. So yeah, it's terrific. And it's exciting to do new things like we're doing in New Zealand right now. We really enjoy those type of opportunities. So it's terrific. What
was that SEN New Zealand launch like?
It was really exciting. Yeah, it was it's a new frontier for us. It's a great opportunity, and it's a whole new country to be doing business in. So it's a bit back to the future. We began the business 15 years ago in another country, and to be back there again now, Max, is terrific in doing some things outside of Australia. So we're really looking forward to it.
Thanks, Hutchie, for coming on the podcast today and putting aside half an hour or so of your time to come on and have a chat. It's been an absolute honour and a privilege, like I mentioned, to get you on for a chat.
Max, I'm absolutely wrapped and excited by your progress. Congratulations on making it to 50 shows. And I look forward to seeing success in the years to come. And I look forward to the day when you're running SEN and I'm knocking on your door looking for a job.
Thanks, Hutchie. Stay tuned, everyone, for some more Sporting Max.